members of this team are dead or sick. The information that came from the United States government and everything is, even though we're questioned, is saying it's not a hazard. There's not going to be any resuspension. The oxides are not, they're going to be so heavy that you won't be able to breathe it into your lungs. So the information that the team, this is the team that cleaned up the mess in Saudi Arabia, was given, has now resulted in team members' deaths and sickness and family destruction. This is the inside of that 120 millimeter impact. The milky white or the cloudy things that you see in this slide is solid uranium dust. This is uranium oxide. This vehicle was clean, and all of this oxide was laying on the floor when we entered it. It's almost as if putting your foot or slapping your hand into talcum powder. It resuspended. And this shows the resuspension of uranium dust, which goes to prove that it is such a hazard for inhalation or ingestion. It's there, and unless it's physically removed, it can be resuspended and inhaled for eternity, 4.5 billion years. That's what makes it so hazardous and so dangerous to civilians, non-combatants, and other individuals. This is proper clothing that should be worn by any individual that's working on or within 25 meters of any vehicle, structure, or material impacted by uranium emissions. This particular individual that's shown in this photograph was not warned that he required respiratory or skin protection to climb or crawl on destroyed Iraqi equipment that had been destroyed by depleted uranium emissions. It just proves and shows that the warnings did not occur. Bernie is today sick also, the individual on top of this tank. Respiratory, kidney problems, rashes, neurological, the same as everybody else. Again, a civilian who has been denied medical care by the United States government. This fine gentleman is deceased. Cancer.
Disregarded by both the Pentagon and the Veterans Administration, the growing frustration of Gulf War veterans was ultimately voiced in a series of hearings before the U.S. Congress, who over the past several years have heard testimony from hundreds of witnesses.
I've sat through 3 years of these hearings, and I'm not too sure we're getting much more information now than we did in the last 2 years.
Memo further states, and I quote again, that all documents which seem to confirm the use or detection of nuclear, chemical, or biological agents should be tagged, and the documents which could embarrass the government or DOD would also be included in the tagged category. That seems to me to be a clear filtering or manipulation of the information.
The person who signed the document is no longer with this process.
There are 2,300 pages of those logs, which are still unavailable to us, and we think that's the Defense Department decision. Do you disagree?
We will make every page available to the committee at the committee's convenience.
But you have not.
In 1993, the U.S. Congress passed a law ordering the military to research inhaled depleted uranium exposures. And one lowly colonel in the United States military, a Colonel Eric Daxon, and his boss, Army Undersecretary Bernard Rosker, broke the law. They failed to conduct the research on inhaled radioactive toxic waste. And here's where Gulf War veterans are. 9 years since the start of the Gulf War, there's no research on this radioactive inhalation poisoning.
This is Colonel Eric Daxon, the Army's chief medical analyst for depleted uranium, and a frequent target of veterans organizations who accuse him of hiding the truth about DU. 50 years of state-supported research allow him to claim that soldiers' exposure to inhaled DU was not serious enough to make them sick.
Now, there have been a lot of people that have said the depleted uranium travels great distances. Well, that's true. But the amount that travels great distances is very, very small. And the thing that I'd like to point out is there is natural uranium in the air that you're breathing right now There's natural uranium in the water you just drank. There's natural, she's basically been through that. And the concentrations at these great distances are so low that it's very, very difficult to distinguish the depleted uranium from the natural uranium. And the body is very, very efficient at eliminating stuff like that. Only a very small percentage of what you actually inhale gets into the body. But the main part of that is you've got 300 tons spread over very, very large areas where the actual concentrations in the soil are very, very small. And the small concentrations mean you cannot internalize that amount. Have you ever gone on a beach? There's enough sand on that beach to kill everybody on that beach, but you can't inhale it all. So that's the problem with that particular analogy.
What constitutes a lethal dose? That is the root question behind the debate over radiation. For the military, inhalation of DU particles poses no risk at all. And yet, in these 1995 videos produced by Captain Roque at Pentagon demand, the dangers of internal contamination from inhalation were, if anything, emphasized.
Depleted uranium dust or smoke may be inhaled if respiratory protection is not worn. It may also be picked up and ingested if gloves are not worn, and the dust is not washed off before eating, drinking, or using the latrine. Depending on how much depleted uranium is inhaled, swallowed, or gets under the skin, heavy metal poisoning may occur, which can cause damage to internal organs and tissues. The second concern, radioactivity. Health effects of ionizing radiation depend on whether it is alpha, beta, or gamma, and if the radioactive material is inside or outside the body.
No, the video's never really been used. That's disturbing. Probably some have seen it, but not all. It's definitely not put out to the extent that it should be. And I think that's obvious because we still have uranium-contaminated equipment scattered all over Iraq and Kuwait. And now we have it in Kosovo and every place else. Everybody knew that I was sick of having kidney problems and respiratory problems while I'm the director of the project trying to figure out how to clean up the mess. In September of 1996, while I was at the Pentagon briefing everybody on the proper procedures to implement the depleted uranium training program, to show the videos that I had the responsibility to write, direct, edit, produce, and send out. September 1996, they came up to me and said, "Hey, Doug, you're hot for DU," verbally. Okay, would somebody help me? Never happened. It's astonishing. That's what they did to the depleted uranium team health physicist and project director who had the knowledge, who asked the questions. Now, and we wonder what they would do to the average soldier. We wonder what they would do to the woman or child.
Strangely enough, Dr. Bernard Rostker is both Undersecretary of the Army and Chief Investigator into Gulf War Syndrome. Often attacked by veterans for doing nothing, he sees no special danger in depleted uranium.
I know there's been a lot of concern about DU. I would ask you to follow the science. We're concerned about the health of our soldiers. We did the testing necessary before the Gulf War. We've taken the claims very seriously. That's why we've collected soil samples. That's why we monitor the health of soldiers who were exposed. That science tells us there is no problem. We continue to do the monitoring to see if any problems develop.
There are people that are sick. That's basically proven. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to focus on those things that have the highest probability of getting these people better. Right now, depleted uranium, the probability of it being the cause is very, very low, with the exception of one population, and that's the folks that have embedded fragments. And we are, in my personal opinion, doing a good job on that.
Of the more than 135,000 Gulf War veterans considered disabled by the U.S. Veterans Administration, only 33 Those who happen to have fragments embedded in their bodies are being monitored for depleted uranium. We visited one of them, friendly fire victim Jerry Wheat, whose condition was diagnosed not by the Army, but by his own father.
That was some of the stuff out of my gear, and there were a couple pieces out of that were out of my body. And that's still, that's still radioactive after all these years. We go up about every 2 years for testing. I get pretty much just the same symptoms, that